That Christmas, my own grandson looked me straight in the eye and asked, "Who are you anyway?" As if I were a stranger. But what I discovered afterward changed everything forever. Subscribe to hear stories that can't be forgotten. My hands trembled as I folded the last row of the sweater. Navy blue yarn, the same shade he always preferred as a child. 50 years of needles dancing between calloused fingers, and still, each piece I finished carried the same love as the first knit I made for my newborn son. The silent house echoed only the tick-tock of the kitchen clock, the very one I received as a wedding gift, which had witnessed every sleepless night when he had a fever, every tear wiped away while waiting for him to come home from teenage parties. The sweater was perfect. Simple, but made with leftover yarn I'd saved for months, penny pinching every dime from my retirement. I looked out the fogged-up window and saw the neighbors' houses already decked out in colorful lights. December always brought this mix of joy and melancholy. Joy for the memories of Christmases past, when he still lived with me and would race down in the morning to see the presents under our little plastic tree. Melancholy because now, at 72, I'd be celebrating another Christmas alone. But this time would be different. I'd received the invitation from my daughter-in-law 3 days ago. A cold, perfunctory phone call. "You can come for Christmas dinner. It'll be at 8. There was no warmth in her voice. No inquiry about my health. Just information, like scheduling a doctor's appointment. Still, my heart leaped with joy. I would finally meet my grandson in person. At 5 years old, he'd be a chatty, curious child, full of energy. I'd saved all the photos my son sent via text. Few, scattered, always with excuses about being too busy for visits. But a grandson. Oh, a grandson would change everything. I picked up the simple gift wrap, made with paper I'd reused from the previous year. Inside, along with the sweater, I tucked a handwritten letter, sharing stories of his father as a young boy, recipes for his favorite cake, promises of playful afternoons we could have. The anticipation warmed my chest as I got ready. The navy blue dress, the same one I wore for special occasions. The subtle lipstick that still lingered at the bottom of the compact. In the mirror, I saw an aged woman but with eyes that sparkled with hope. A grandmother who would finally have the chance to be a grandmother. I caught the bus at 7 in the evening. The ride to his house took 40 minutes, and with each stop, my heart beat faster. What kind of games would he like? Would he know I sewed cloth dolls? Would he want to hear the stories I'd saved all these years? Their house was in a neighborhood I didn't know well. Big houses, high gates, manicured gardens. When I stepped off in front of the address, I was struck. It was even bigger than I'd imagined from the few photos he'd shown me. I took a deep breath, clutched the gift against my chest, and rang the doorbell. The door opened and she appeared. My daughter-in-law, a golden dress, impeccably styled hair, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Behind her, I could glimpse an illuminated foyer, a gigantic, shimmering tree, the sound of lively conversations drifting from the living room. "You're right on time," she said, but the tone wasn't welcoming. It was that of someone fulfilling an obligation. "Come in, but wipe your feet thoroughly." I stepped inside slowly, feeling small in that setting. Everything gleamed, the marble floor, the gold ornaments, the crystal glasses on the table. There were at least 15 people in the room, unfamiliar faces who chuckled loudly when they saw me, whispering amongst themselves comments I couldn't decipher. "Mom's here," my son announced, rising from the sofa where he'd been holding a drink. He came to greet me, but it was a quick hug, devoid of warmth. "Are you okay? Were you able to get here on your own?" Before I could properly respond, a child darted across the room. It was him, my grandson. Dark hair like his father's, bright eyes chasing a remote-controlled car that cost more than my entire retirement. "Son, come here," my son called. "Come meet your grandma." The boy stopped and looked at me with curiosity. There was no recognition in his eyes, only the politeness of a well-taught child. "Hi," he said shyly, hiding behind his mother's leg. "She brought you a present." his father continued, pointing to the package in my hands. My daughter-in-law quickly intercepted. How thoughtful. But he's already received so much today, hasn't he, honey? Maybe it's best to leave it for another time. I felt the first cut. Subtle, almost imperceptible, but painful. It's nothing too special, I murmured. Just a sweater I knit. How sweet, she cut in again. Handmade. How authentic. The words sounded like veiled criticism. I was led to a chair in the corner of the room, far from the main table where the important guests were seated. I watched my grandson play from a distance, trying to find familiar traits in his gestures. When he laughed, for a second, he resembled my son at 5 years old. The same mischievous grin, the same way of tilting his head. "Sweetie, don't run so much in the house," his mother admonished. "And be careful with your new clothes." During dinner, I tried to strike up conversations with a few people, but the responses were monosyllabic. I asked about my son's work, about my grandson's school, about anything that might connect me to this family that seemed as distant as the stars outside. "You live alone?" asked a lady with perfectly coiffed white hair. When I confirmed, she exchanged a pitying glance with the person next to her. "That must be difficult at your age." It wasn't pity I wanted. It was belonging. After dinner, while the adults discussed international travel and investments, I watched my grandson play with his new gifts. Expensive electronic toys, designer clothes, everything a child could dream of. I approached him slowly. "Do you like stories?" I asked softly. He looked up from the tablet he was engrossed in. "What kind of stories?" "Stories about your dad when he was little, just like you." For a moment, I saw genuine interest in his eyes. But before I could continue, his mother appeared. "Honey, don't bother her. Come play with your cousins." And just like that, he pulled away. I stood there, holding a sweater no one wanted and stories no one cared to hear. The room was divided into two worlds. The inner circle of the new family, where laughter was loud and hugs were warm, and my silent corner where I watched like a stranger in my own story. "Grandma, what's that?" my grandson asked, pointing to my old faux leather tote bag. The question was innocent, but it hit me like a dart. Before I could answer, his mother appeared quickly. "Honey, don't touch other people's things," she said, pulling him by the hand. "Let's go see the other presents. But we already have pavlova from the French bakery and lava cakes. Maybe you should just take it back with you." As if I wasn't there. As if my presence was a temporary inconvenience to be tolerated. "Honey," I called him softly, when I managed a moment alone with him in the hallway. "Can I talk to you?" He has English lessons, swimming, tennis. His schedule is pretty packed. The woman who worked 3 jobs to pay for her education, who stayed up all night when he was sick, who sold family jewelry to buy his college textbooks. Now I was just a complication. I returned to the living room and found my grandson playing alone in a corner, momentarily abandoned by the adults engrossed in their sophisticated conversations. "Can I sit here?" I asked, pointing to the floor beside him. He nodded, not taking his eyes off the toy truck maneuvering between the table legs. "You know," I began slowly, "your dad had a truck just like this when he was little. It wasn't remote controlled, but he'd push it all over the house, making engine noises. Can you tell me more?" As if my presence clashed with that perfect environment, like a smudge on an expensive painting. As the evening wore on, I became increasingly transparent. Conversations flowed around me as if I were furniture, present but irrelevant. They talked about trips to Miami, private schools, stock market investments. A universe completely alien to my reality as a retiree counting coins for medicine. "Our son's school costs more per month than many professionals earn," I heard my daughter-in-law proudly comment to a friend. "But education is priceless, isn't it?" I'd also given priceless education, but of a kind that this environment didn't recognize as valid. "Grandma?" My grandson appeared beside me once more, momentarily escaping the constant supervision of the adults. "Do you have other grandkids besides me?" I turned to where my daughter-in-law was and saw her chatting animatedly, not realizing her son had asked me that innocent yet devastating question. She had lied to him about me. invented an excuse to justify my absence from their lives. "Mommy said that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah. She said you can't stay long because you have to visit your other grandkids tonight. Sometimes grown-ups get confused with words, my love. You are my only and most special grandson. She's tired." "You know what?" she said, loud enough for me to hear. "I think it's time for his nap. It's been a very long day. He has swimming early tomorrow." My son was on the patio, smoking a cigar with the men, discussing politics and the economy. My daughter-in-law was coordinating the cleanup of the expensive dishes with the housekeeper. It was almost midnight when I decided I'd endured enough humiliation for one night. I grabbed my purse and discreetly made my way to the door. No one noticed my departure. I walked through the deserted streets, clutching the package with the sweater close to my chest. The pre-dawn chill bit at my face, but it didn't hurt as much as the certainty that I had been erased from my own family. With every step, memories washed over me in painful waves. I remembered the first time I held my son in my arms. He'd been born premature, and the doctors hadn't guaranteed he'd survive. I spent days and nights in the hospital, softly singing the lullabies my own mother sang to me, promising God I'd make any sacrifice if he let my child live. And he lived. He grew up strong, smart, and determined. But somewhere along the way, I'd become an obstacle instead of a bridge to his future. I stopped at a small park where there was a bench under a lamppost. I sat down and opened the package. The navy blue sweater glowed softly under the yellowish light. Each stitch held a story. The Sunday afternoons I spent knitting while listening to the radio. The measurements I took imagining his size, the hope of seeing him wear something made by my hands. A tear fell onto the fabric, then another, and another, until I cried for all the lost Christmases, all the conversations we never had, all the hugs he didn't give me when he came home from school, and I was waiting at the door. "Ma'am, are you all right?" A male voice brought me back to the present. It was a young man, maybe the age my son was when he left home. He had a backpack slung over his shoulders and was looking at me with genuine concern. "I'm fine, thank you," I lied, wiping my face with the back of my hand. "You shouldn't be out here alone this late," he said gently. "Can I call someone for you?" "A relative. A taxi." "I have no one to call," I admitted, and that confession hurt more than I expected. He hesitated for a moment, then sat down beside me on the bench. "Want to talk? Sometimes it helps." And then, to a complete stranger, I told him about the Christmas I had just experienced, about my grandson who didn't know me, about my son who treated me like a social obligation, about my daughter-in-law who saw me as an embarrassment. The young man listened in silence, nodding at the right moments. "You know," he said when I finished, "my grandmother died last year, and what I regret most is not spending more time with her. She always said she had stories to tell, recipes to teach, but I was always busy with college, work, friends." He paused for a moment, looking up at the starry sky. After she passed away, I found dozens of letters she had written to me and never sent. Letters telling about our family, about the past, about things I'll never know now. "I'd give anything to have a grandma like you here with me today." His words struck a deep chord in my heart. What was her name? Donna Maria. Just like you, I'm sure. You grandmothers have this special strength that we only recognize when it's too late. We sat in silence for a while, two strangers united by the pain of loss. He for someone gone, I for someone who was still alive but had lost me. "May I see the sweater?" he asked. I showed him the piece, and he examined the stitches carefully. "It's perfect. My grandmother used to knit too. She said every stitch was a prayer, every thread a piece of her heart." "That's exactly it," I whispered. "That's exactly it." When the young man stood up to leave, he squeezed my hand warmly. "You're special. If they can't see that, it's not your problem." He disappeared into the pre-dawn darkness, but his words echoed in my chest. For the first time in hours, I felt like someone had truly seen me. 3 days after the disastrous Christmas, I received an unexpected call. It was a woman who introduced herself as Anna, my grandson's teacher at school. "Ma'am, I hope I'm not intruding," she said in a gentle voice, "but I need to speak with you about your grandson. Would you be able to come to the school this afternoon?" My heart leaped. Was it a health issue? A problem at school? I agreed immediately, and at 2 p.m, I found myself sitting in a small, cozy room decorated with children's drawings and smelling of crayons. "You're our student's grandmother, aren't you?" Anna asked, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes. "I am," I replied, still nervous. "Is he all right? Did something happen?" "He's physically fine," she said, choosing her words carefully. "But I'm concerned about him emotionally. Since the beginning of the school year, he constantly asks about his grandmother. He says he has a grandmother who lives far away, and he can never visit." My heart ached. "Lives far away?" "That's what he says. He says his grandmother lives in another country, which is why he can only speak with her on the phone, very rarely." Anna looked at me with curiosity. "But you live here in town, don't you?" "I do," I confirmed, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. "Less than an hour away by bus." Anna sighed deeply. I figured something was off. "Yesterday during our circle time about family, he drew his grandmother and said she had to go far away because there wasn't any room for her here. Those were his exact words." She showed me the drawing. It was touching in its simplicity. 2 figures holding hands, one small and one larger, with red hearts floating around them. In the corner, he had written in a shaky hand, "Me and my grandma who lives far away." Tears came before I could control them. He really said that? That there wasn't room for me? He did, and more. He said his mom explained that real grandmothers live with families, but his grandmother can't live nearby because things are different now. Every word was a stab. My own son had created a fantasy to explain my absence, a lie that hurt both me and the boy. "There's one more thing," Anna continued hesitantly. "Yesterday was show and tell about family. Each child brought photos and objects from their grandparents. He was very sad because he said he didn't have any photos of his grandmother to show. But I sent dozens of photos to my son over the years," I protested. "Photos from my childhood, from his parents, our family." "You're right," Anna nodded, shaking her head. "I realized something was off. That's why I decided to call. Kids need to know their roots, their stories." She stood up and went to a shelf, returning with a folder. "I wanted to ask you a favor. Could you tell him a little about your family? Bring some old photos. I'm sure he'd love to learn your story." I accepted immediately. We scheduled a meeting for the following week, where I could talk with my grandson at school, away from the filters and lies that had been built around our relationship. "Anna," I asked before I left, "can I ask why you decided to reach out? It must be unusual for a teacher to get so involved." She smiled sadly. "I lost my grandmother when I was little, and my mom never talked about her. Only as an adult did I discover how many wonderful stories I'd missed because of the silence. I don't want that to happen to another child. I left the school with a lighter heart than I'd had in years. Finally, someone had seen me not as a problem to be solved, but as a grandmother who had value, stories to tell, love to give. That night, I started organizing the old photos, family documents, my mother's handwritten recipes. I was going to show my grandson that he came from a lineage of strong, hard-working, loving people, that his grandmother didn't live far away because she didn't have space. She was right here, just waiting for a chance to show who she really was. On the day I was scheduled to talk with my grandson at school, I arrived early and carefully arranged everything I'd brought. Old photos in worn leather albums, my mother's handwritten recipes, a few knitted items I'd kept since my son was a baby, and the navy blue sweater that went unclaimed last Christmas. Anna greeted me with a warm smile and led me to the room where my grandson was waiting. When he saw me, his eyes lit up in a way that reminded me why it's worth fighting for love, even when it seems impossible. "Grandma, the teacher said you were going to tell stories about our family." For 2 magical hours, I showed him photos of his great-grandfather whom he never knew, a man who worked the land and had hands as big as shovels. I told him about his great-grandmother, who knew how to make homemade remedies with herbs from the backyard. I explained how his father was born in a simple house, but one filled with dreams. "Did Dad live in a small house like this one in the picture?" he asked, impressed as he saw an image of our old 3-room house. He did, and he was happy. He used to run barefoot in the yard, climb the mango tree, help Grandma hang clothes on the line. "But Mom said Dad always lived in a big house," he said, confused. Anna and I exchanged a look. "Sometimes people move when they grow up," I explained diplomatically. "The important thing is that there was a lot of love in all those houses." When I showed him the sweater I'd knitted, he touched the stitches with curiosity. "It's soft. Can I try it on?" "Of course you can. It was made just for you." He put on the garment, and it fit perfectly. Exactly the size I had imagined. And for the first time since that failed Christmas, I felt like I'd gotten something right. "Can I keep it?" he asked. "It's yours," I replied, adjusting the collar around his neck. At that moment, the door to the room burst open. My son came in like a whirlwind, with his wife right behind him, both with furious expressions. "What is this nonsense?" he shouted, completely ignoring the presence of the teacher and his own son. "How dare you bring my mother here without telling me?" Anna stood up, maintaining professional calm. "Sir, there's nothing wrong with a grandmother talking to her grandson. It's natural and healthy." "What's natural is for her to respect the boundaries we've set," his wife cut in, looking at me with disdain. "We decide how we want to raise our son." My grandson was leaning against the wall, his eyes wide, watching the adults yell. Without thinking, I stepped in front of him, shielding him from the scene. "Don't yell in front of the child," I asked, but my voice trembled. "Mom," my son pointed his finger at me as if I were a criminal. "You've crossed the line. You can't show up at my son's school without permission. That's a privacy invasion." "Invasion?" I repeated, incredulous. "I'm his grandmother. What invasion is this?" "The invasion of someone who doesn't respect our family's rules," his wife said, moving closer to her son. "Honey, take that off now. We won't accept gifts from someone who doesn't consult the parents first." "But I like the sweater," my grandson protested, hugging himself as if he wanted to protect the garment. "It's warm, and Grandma made it for me." "Take it off now." His mother's voice came out louder than she intended, startling the child. It was at that moment that something inside me snapped. All the years of silence, of humiliation, of being treated like a problem to be managed, exploded into a courage I didn't even know I still possessed. "Enough!" I shouted, surprising everyone, including myself. "Enough of the lies! Enough of treating me like I'm something to be ashamed of!" The silence that followed was deafening. Anna held her breath. My grandson looked at me with wide eyes, but not in fear, in admiration. "This boy has a right to know his own family," I continued, trembling with emotion. "You made up that I live far away, that I have other grandchildren, that I can't be part of his life. Why? Because you're ashamed of me?" "Mom, control yourself," my son whispered, looking nervously at the teacher. "I won't control myself. I raised you alone. I worked 3 jobs to pay for your education. I sold everything I had so you could have opportunities. And now I'm treated like a stranger?" Tears streamed down my face, but for the first time, they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of liberation. "You want me to disappear because I don't fit into the perfect life you've built. But I exist. I'm real. And this boy deserves to know where he comes from." My grandson broke free from his mother and ran to me, hugging me tightly. "I want to know, Grandma. I want to hear more stories." His wife tried to pull him back. "Son, don't be stubborn. Let him choose," I exploded again. "For once in his life, let this child choose." Anna, who had witnessed everything in silence, finally spoke up. "Perhaps it would be best if we talked more calmly. This is a school environment, and the child is visibly upset by this situation." But it was too late. The bridge had been burned. My son looked at me with a coldness I had never seen before. There, Mom. You got what you wanted. Caused a scene at my son's school. Embarrassed my whole family. He stopped, took a deep breath, and said the words that shattered me. I think it's best if you don't try to contact us anymore. This has gone too far. In the days following the confrontation at school, I was plunged into a silence that seemed to suck all the color out of the world. The house echoed with emptiness, and I wandered through the rooms like a ghost in my own life. I had fought for the truth and lost everything. But on the fourth day, the doorbell rang. It was Anna, my grandson's teacher, holding a folder of papers and a determined look on her face. Can I come in? I need to talk to you. I made some coffee, and we sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd taught my son to do his homework decades ago. After what happened at school, Anna began, I spoke with some other teachers and staff who have known the family for a longer time. I discovered some things that have deeply disturbed me. She opened the folder and showed me some notes. Your grandson has always shown an interest in talking about his grandmother, but every time his parents mention it, they cut off the conversation. They even asked that we not encourage discussions about extended family. What do you mean? I asked, disbelieving what I was hearing. They officially requested that the school avoid activities involving grandparents. They justified it by saying the family situation was complicated, and they didn't want to confuse the child with people who aren't part of his daily life. Each word was a fresh wound. But Anna continued. Yesterday, after the commotion, a janitorial assistant approached me. She said she'd heard your son on the phone multiple times, speaking poorly of you to others. Comments about how his mother was dramatic, how she didn't fit the current family mold. I felt the ground collapse beneath my feet. He said that at school? In the pickup line, waiting to get the boy. Other mothers heard it too. One of them told me she felt uncomfortable because she found it strange for someone to speak that way about their own mother. Anna closed the folder and looked me directly in the eye. But there's something more important I need to tell you. Yesterday after you left, your grandson spent the rest of the day asking about his grandma. He said he wanted to come to your house, to see where his dad lived when he was little. My heart leaped with hope. And today, she continued, pulling a folded paper from her purse. He gave me this, asking me to give it to you. It was a drawing done with colored pencils. It showed two people holding hands walking towards a small house. One was clearly a child, the other an older woman. At the bottom, he had written in shaky letters, I want to visit the house where Daddy was a kid. Tears came uncontrollably. He did this today? He did. And when I asked him why he drew it, he said, Grandma told the truth. Daddy lived in a small house and was happy. I want to see what it was like. Anna stood up and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the small yard where my son used to play as a child. Ma'am, I've worked with children for 20 years. I know when a child is being deprived of something important. Your grandson needs you, even if his parents don't want to admit it. But how? I asked. After what happened? Leave that to me, she said with determination. I have some ideas. The school has projects on oral history, on families. It's perfectly educational for a child to learn about their roots. That night, for the first time in days, I was able to sleep with a little hope in my heart. Anna had given me something more precious than any gift, the certainty that I wasn't alone in this fight, and that my grandson, even as just a child, could see the truth through all the lies that had been built around us. The drawing was taped to the refrigerator door, right where I used to tape my son's drawings. Some stories repeat themselves, but not always in the way we expect. 2 weeks later, on a rainy January afternoon, Anna called me with an unexpected proposal. The school is doing a special project on family stories next week. Each child will present something about their origins, their family traditions. Your grandson specifically asked to talk about his grandmother. My heart pounded. But will his parents allow it? I've already spoken with them. I explained that it's a mandatory pedagogical project, part of the curriculum. They can't prevent it without hindering his education. Anna had found a loophole, a way to give my grandson the right to know his own history, even against his parents' wishes. Could you come on Friday? It'll be a 15-minute presentation. He wants to show the photos he saw the other day and talk about his family. I accepted immediately, but I spent the week in a mix of anticipation and terror. What if my son showed up to stop it? What if it was another public humiliation? On Friday, I arrived at the school with trembling hands. Anna led me to the room where several mothers and fathers were seated to watch the children's presentations. My son and his wife were there, seated at the back, with closed expressions. When it was my grandson's turn, he walked to the front of the class, holding a poster board he'd prepared with Anna during the week. He was wearing the navy blue sweater I'd knitted. "My name is," he said his full name, "and today I'm going to talk about my paternal grandmother." I felt the air leave my lungs. At the back of the room, I saw my son shift uncomfortably in his chair. "My grandma's name is," he said my name with pride, "and she lived her whole life right here in our town. She doesn't live far away like I used to think." Some of the mothers turned to look at me with curiosity. One of them whispered something to the person next to her. "My grandma raised my dad by herself in a small house, but it was full of love." He showed the photo of our old house. "She worked very hard to give my dad an education, and he became an important man because of her." I saw tears in the eyes of some women in the audience. Anna, standing by the blackboard, smiled proudly. "My grandma knows how to knit, cook, tell stories. She made this sweater especially for me." He opened his arms, showing the garment. Every stitch was made thinking of me. I couldn't hold back my tears anymore. From the back of the room, I heard my son cough nervously. "The most important thing I've learned about my grandma," my grandson continued, looking directly at me, "is that she never stopped loving my dad, even when he was away. And she loves me too, even without knowing me very well yet." The silence in the room was absolute. Even the other children were paying attention. "That's why I want everyone to know that I have the best grandma in the world." Anna approached us. "That was beautiful," she said softly. "He rehearsed all week. He wanted it to be perfect." At that moment, one of the mothers who had been watching came over. "Excuse me for intruding, but what a lovely story. My kids would love to have a grandma like you." "My mother passed away when my kids were little," said another. "It's so touching to see a grandma so involved." I realized that several people were looking at me not with pity or discomfort, but with admiration and respect. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I mattered, that my story had value. My grandson tugged on my hand. "Grandma, can you take me to your house now? I want to see where Daddy used to play." I looked around, searching for my son, but he had truly gone. "I need to ask your parents, sweetie." "But they left," he said simply. "Miss Anna said it's okay for you to take me. Can I go?" Anna confirmed with a nod. And so, for the first time in my life, I took my grandson home. When we got to my house, my grandson ran through the small rooms with contagious curiosity. He touched everything, asked about every object, every photo hanging on the wall. "Is this where Daddy slept?" he asked, looking at the room that had been his throughout his childhood and adolescence. "It is. He had a small bed right over there where the sewing machine is now." "And did he play in the backyard?" "He did. He'd climb the mango tree, build forts with old sheets, make pets out of anything he found." We spent the entire afternoon like that. Him listening to stories, me recalling moments I thought could never be shared again. We made simple cookies in the small kitchen, and he found it more fun than any expensive toy. "Grandma," he said, his hands covered in dough, "why doesn't Daddy like to come here?" The question caught me off guard. How do you explain to a child that sometimes people are embarrassed by where they come from? Sometimes when people grow up, they think they need to be different from who they were before, I tried to explain. "Your dad isn't a bad person. He just forgot some important things." "But I don't want to forget," he said seriously. "I want to come here all the time." "Can I?" I promised I'd do everything I could to make that happen, even knowing it would be an uphill battle. Anna came to pick him up at the end of the afternoon. On the ride back, my grandson chattered non-stop about everything he had seen and learned. "Miss Anna, Grandma has an album with pictures of Daddy as a baby, and she makes cookies that stick to your hand. And she taught me a song my great-grandma used to sing. When we arrived at his house, my son was at the door, waiting. His expression was a mix of anger and something I couldn't quite identify. Maybe nostalgia, maybe regret. "Daddy," my grandson shouted, running to him. "I went to the house where you grew up. It's small, but it's nice, and it has the mango tree you used to climb." My son looked at me over the boy's head. For a moment, I saw the little boy he had been, running through the halls of our modest house, making grand plans for the future. "Mom," he said quietly, "we need to talk." Anna said her goodbyes discreetly. I crouched down to be at my grandson's eye level. "Thank you for the most beautiful day of my life," I whispered in his ear. "Thank you for showing me where I come from, Grandma." That night my son called me. The conversation was long, difficult, filled with heavy silences. He apologized, not for the words he had said, but for the way he had said them. He explained that he felt pressure from his wife, from his social circle, from the expectations of a life he had built by denying his origins. "I didn't want him to know we were poor," he admitted. "I thought it would hold him back somehow. But we weren't poor in love," I replied, "and that's what matters." It wasn't a full reconciliation. There are still wounds that need to heal, pride that needs to be swallowed on both sides. But something changed that day at school, when a 5-year-old boy had the courage to tell the truth to a room full of adults. Today, 3 months later, my grandson visits me every Saturday afternoon. My son still hasn't returned to the house where he grew up, but he no longer prevents the visits. My daughter-in-law tolerates my presence with polite coolness, but it's better than open hostility. And I learned the most important lesson of my life. Our identity doesn't depend on the recognition of others. We are made of the stories we keep, the love we choose to spread, the bridges we build even when it seems impossible. Sometimes it's a 5-year-old child who teaches us what truly matters. And sometimes the greatest victory isn't being accepted back. It's discovering that we never lost our value, even when others can't see it. Right now, as I write these words, I hear the gate open. It's Saturday afternoon. My grandson comes running, shouting, "Grandma!" as if he hadn't seen me in years, even though he was just here last week. And I run to open the door, because some traditions are worth preserving. Some stories deserve to be told, and some loves are too strong to be erased by time or shame. The navy blue sweater is on the clothesline, drying after the last wash. Tomorrow he'll wear it again, and once more I'll feel like every stitch was worth it. If this story touched your heart, subscribe and share so more people can hear what should never be forgotten. Because everyone deserves to know their roots, and every grandma deserves to have her story told.